Good morning, Bam. Good morning, classmates. We are the Group 5 and today we will tackle all about the climate change. I am Melvin Yuperocho and I am the first reporter for today. But before I will start my report, let us first watch this video.
Since the Industrial Revolution, humans have released over 1.5 trillion tons of carbon dioxide or CO2 into the Earth's atmosphere. In the year 2019, we were still pumping out around 37 billion more. That's 50% more than the year 2000 and almost 3 times as much as 50 years ago. And it's not just CO2. We're also pumping out growing volumes of other greenhouse gases such as methane and nitrous oxide. Combining all of our greenhouse gases, we're emitting 51 billion tons of carbon dioxide equivalents each year. And emissions keep rising. But they need to get down to zero. In recent years, the consequences have become more serious and visible. Almost every year breaks some horrible record. We've had more heat waves, the most glaciers melting, and the lowest amount of ice ever recorded at the North Pole. Of the last 22 years, 20 have been the hottest on record. The only way to limit this rapid climate change is to decrease our collective emissions quickly. But although all countries agree on this goal in principle, they do not agree who is responsible or who should bear the heaviest load. The developed countries point at their own efforts to reduce emissions and the fact that the large developing countries on the rise, especially China, are currently releasing much more CO2. On the other hand, developing countries argue that emissions by the West are lifestyle emissions, while for developing countries, they are survival emissions. Others call rich countries hypocrites that got rich by polluting without restraint and now expect others not to industrialize and stay poor. So, who is responsible for climate change and CO2 emissions? And regardless of the past, who needs to do the most today? In this video, we'll talk exclusively about nation-states. We'll look at the fossil fuel industry in another video. Question 1 of 3. Which countries emit the most carbon dioxide today? In 2017, humans emitted about 36 billion tons of CO2. More than 50% came from Asia. North America and Europe followed with 18% and 17%. While Africa, South America and Oceania together only contributed 8%. China is by far the world's largest emitter, with 10 billion tons of CO2 every year, or 27% of global emissions. It's followed by the USA with 15% and the European Union with around 10%. Together, this is more than half of the world's CO2 emissions. So it's clear that without the willingness and action of these 3 industrial blocs, humanity will not be able to become carbon neutral and prevent severe climate change. Next on our list is India at 7%, Russia at 5%, Japan at 3%, and Iran, Saudi Arabia, South Korea and Canada all just short of 2%. Together with the first 3, the top 10 are responsible for 75% of global emissions. But if we only look at the current situation, we're not getting the full picture. Question 2 of 3. Which countries have emitted the most in total? If we look at emissions throughout history until today, the outlook changes drastically. The US and the EU both knock China off the top spot. The US is responsible for 25% of the world's historical emissions, emitting 400 billion tons, mostly in the 20th century. In second place is the EU at 22%. China comes in third at just under 13%, around half of the USA's contribution. India's contribution shrinks to 3% along with the whole of Africa and South America. The UK is responsible for 1% of annual global emissions, but takes 5% of the historical responsibility. Germany, producing 2% of emissions per year today, has contributed almost 6%, as much as the whole of Africa and South America combined. So the narrative that rapid climate change is really the responsibility of the developing world is hard to defend if facts matter to you. But this is still not the whole story, because focusing on countries mixes two things: population numbers and total emissions. If a country has more people in general, its emissions are of course higher. Things look very different if we look at individuals like you, dear viewer. Question 3 of 3. Which countries emit the most carbon dioxide per person? The average human is responsible for around 5 tons of CO2 each year. But averages can be misleading. The countries with the largest CO2 emissions per person are some of the world's major oil and gas producers. In 2017, Qatar had the highest emissions at a hefty 49 tons per person, followed by Trinidad and Tobago, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Brunei, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia. But those are outliers. Australians have one of the highest carbon footprints per person, 17 tons a year. That's more than triple the global average and slightly more than the average US, American and Canadian at 16 tons. The Germans do a little better at close to 10 tons, but this is still twice the global average. China may be the world's largest emitter, but it's also the world's most populous country with over 1.4 billion people, 18.5% of the world population. Per person, it's above average at 7 tons. Historically, CO2 emissions have been closely tied to a high standard of living. Wealth is one of the strongest indicators of our carbon footprint because as we move from poor to rich, we gain access to electricity, heating, air conditioning, lighting, modern cooking, cars or planes, smartphones, computers, and interact with people across the world online. The enormous rise of China's CO2 emissions is coupled with the greatest reduction of poverty in history. If we order CO2 emissions by income, we see that the richest half of countries are responsible for 86% of global emissions and the bottom half for only 14%. The average German emits more than 5 times as much as the average Indian. In just 2.3 days, the average American emits as much as the average Nigerian in a year. And not only that, the harsh reality is that it's the countries that contribute least to the problem that stand to lose the most from rapid climate change. The developing world will be hit the hardest. The consequences could be food insecurity, conflicts over resources, harsher and more frequent natural disasters, and large climate refugee movements. Question 4 of 3. So who should take responsibility? Many of today's richest countries are in a convenient position. They have become rich over centuries of fossil fuel burning and industrial production. They have a large historical footprint, and their wealth means they still emit a lot per person. But their country's annual emissions are now dwarfed by other countries because the giant that is China is finally catching up, and other giants like India are on their way. Many Germans, for example, wonder how, if Germany only accounts for 2% of yearly emissions, it can have a meaningful impact on reducing emissions. The answer is simple. For one, the richest countries have the resources, highly educated workforces and technology to develop low-cost, low-carbon solutions and spread them around the world. If we don't want poorer countries to become as fossil fuel dependent as we are, we need low-carbon technology to be cheap and available. And we're getting there. The cost of renewables is falling quickly, and a variety of solutions are on the horizon for many different sectors. But it needs to happen much faster. If the rich countries of the West decide to seriously tackle rapid climate change, the rest of the world would follow, because it has no choice. Just like when the European Union enforced energy efficiency standards for technology, the rest of the world adopted them too because they wanted to be able to continue trading with the bloc. Still, this doesn't absolve others of their responsibility. China is the largest CO2 emitter today, and it's China's responsibility to grow in a way that will make it possible to transition to a zero-carbon world in time. Others acting irresponsibly yesterday is a horrible excuse for repeating the same mistakes today. Climate change is a global problem, and no country alone can fix it. Working out who's responsible is not as simple as it seems, and in a way it's a daft question, but one that has plagued international politics for decades. In the end, it's pretty simple. Everybody needs to do the best they can. And right now, we are all not doing that. But we can begin today. This video is part of a series about climate change supported by Breakthrough Energy, a coalition founded by Bill Gates that's working to expand clean energy investment and support the innovations that will lead the world to net zero carbon emissions. Also, a special thanks to the team at Our World in Data for helping us out with data and research.
And now I will tackle what is climate change and what is the difference of climate change and global warming. Climate change is the long-term changes in the climate, in the average temperature, and the precipitation. Precipitation means that water is released from clouds in the form of rain, freezing, sleet, snow, or hail. Since in the Philippines we are located in a tropical region, so we only experience the wet and dry season. So it recognizes that although the average surface temperature may increase, the regional or local temperature may decrease or remain constant. While in global warming, it is the increase of the Earth's average surface temperature due to the buildup of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Global warming only refers to the Earth's rising temperature. So that is the difference of global warming and climate change. Always remember that climate change is the long-term changes of the climate, while the global warming only refers to the increase in the temperature of the Earth's surface. Now we know the difference of climate change and global warming. Let's proceed to what is climate, weather, and the natural disaster. As discussed earlier, we all know that the definition of climate change determines the long-term character of the given place. For instance, whether it is a temperate or a tropical. Tropical, it is located near in the equator. So they experience 65 degrees Fahrenheit or above, while the temperate region locates lower or upper the tropical region. And mas mataas pa po sa temperate region and mas mababa po sa temperate region is what we call the polar region. Next, what is weather? Weather refers to a short term of conditions that can change quickly. And now I will explain what is disaster. Disaster is a serious disruptions to the functioning of a community that exceed its capacity to cope using its own resources. Disasters can be caused by natural, man-made, or technological hazards, as well as various factors that influence the exposure and the vulnerability of the community. And now, let us proceed to the meteorological phenomena. As we all know, phenomena is studied by scientists, but they are difficult finding out the answers. First is to be discussed is the climate phenomena. It is extreme temperatures, droughts, and forest fires. The second is the hydrological phenomena, which involves floods and mass movements. The third is the geophysical phenomena, earthquakes, tsunami, volcanic activity. Geophysical phenomena are not directly linked to climate and weather changes, although their effects are often extreme. And now, let us discuss what is a greenhouse effect. Solar energy in the form of radiation reaches the Earth, where 2/3 it gets absorbed by the planet's surface. The rest is reflected back into the atmosphere, where greenhouse gases operate. These then reflect the energy back to Earth, where it covers again to heat. This process keeps the planet habitable. This phenomenon is called the greenhouse effect. Ano po nga ba ang greenhouse effect? So, para po mas maintindihan natin, ito po ay, meron po tayong picture ipinakita. Greenhouse effect is meron po siyang glass walls and a roof walls. And it is heated or magkakaroon po siya, natatamaan siya ng sun rays. At yung sun rays po is i-absorb ng glass walls and the roof walls. Though, hindi po made of glass ang Earth, but then, meron po siyang air na kasurround sa kanya, which is the atmosphere. So, pag during daytime, ang araw po ay naglalabas ng heat rays or the UV rays, ultraviolet rays po. And then, when it is, pag na-direct na po sa sun yung heat rays, ang ating pong atmosphere is nag-absorb and nag-reflect nag-reflect po para sa sunlight. Para po mainitan po yung Earth, for us, it is habitable to live for us humans, animals, and plants. And during nighttime, ang purpose po ng greenhouse effect so that yung Earth po natin, ilalabas po ni atmosphere yung mga na-absorb niya na heat, and then para po mainitan po yung Earth. So that meron pa rin po siyang rotation po para mabuhay po yung mga tao. Lastly, the greenhouse gases occur naturally in the atmosphere. They let sun's rays pass through while absorbing thermal energy radiated from the Earth's surface, keeping our planet warm. The examples of greenhouse gases are methane, carbon dioxide, and water vapor.
Hey guys, I'm Maria Alexis Duan A. Olvido, in next presenter for this report. So, greenhouse gases examples are the water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and the ozone. As we all know, that greenhouse effect is that sunlight that hits Earth is reflected back into space, with the rest become heat. But greenhouse gases prevent heat from escaping into space. They bouncing back to the Earth's surface, becoming the planet warm. So, the gases absorb solar energy and keep heat close to Earth's surface rather than letting it escape into space. The more na madami ma-produce na greenhouse gases, the more na wala nang mag-reflect pabalik sa sunlight, kay i-absorb ito ng mga greenhouse gases. So, kaya mas lalong nagainit ang mundo. Carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is one of the main greenhouse gases from human activity that contributes to climate change. The burning of fossil fuel, the melting of permafrost or permanently frozen soil, and the decomposition of organic matter all contribute to increased level of carbon dioxide. So, carbon dioxide is a huge amount of carbonaceous matter in the form of oil and coal were buried deep in the earth during Paleozoic era. A large area of horsetail and marine plankton remove most of the carbon dioxide from atmosphere. After their death, these plants sediment to the bottom of the wetland and soil, and in the absence of oxygen, they become or turned into coal and oil. By burning and mining them, we are releasing carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So, carbon dioxide contributes global warming because mawala na yung ability ng Earth na i-cool ang kanyang sarili pag masyado nang madami yung greenhouse gases, kay imbis na ang sunlight is mag-reflect back sa space, kay gina-absorb na siya ng carbon dioxide. So next is the methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas 3 times more potent than carbon dioxide. It is created in an environment with no access to oxygen. Through methane fermentation, large amount of methane are released during oil and gas extraction and transportation, through livestock farming and from landfills and through rice cultivation. So, ang methane kay more efficient siya sa trapping ng heat than those other gases. So, imbis na maglabas pabalik ang init, mas gina-absorb siya ng mga greenhouse gases, reason to warm the earth and the temperature rises. Modern climate change is caused by an excess of greenhouse gases. Too much insulation caused the planet to overheat, which has already begun to change the climate. So, yes. Greenhouse gases is the nitrogen oxide. A greenhouse gases 300 times more potent than the main source of nitrogen oxide emission are the burning of fossil fuel and transport and industry, industrial agriculture, as well as production of some chemical including fertilizers. So, deforestation, most of the current deforestation is linked to burning and cutting down tropical rainforest, primary for agriculture or grazing for production of charcoal, and secondary for logging woods and woods as a material. So, ang deforestation kay makakontribute siya ng pagdami ng release ng mga greenhouse gases. So, although tropical rainforest covers only about 6% of Earth's surface, they had a significant impact to the global climate. Tropical forests have the high photosynthetic productivity as well as the ability to cool the Earth's surface of all forests on Earth, helping to mitigate global warming. So, if ever nga makalbo na yung mga forests or gubat sa mundo, wala nang mag-absorb ng carbon dioxide at mag-release ng enough oxygen, and makabigay ng fresh air sa mundo para di gaano kainit ang mundo. Like, sila kasi din yung big factor sa pagbalance ng earth temperature. Phenomena related to climate change. Those that occurs or manifest without human input, like earthquake, landslide, volcanic eruption, flood, hurricane, tornadoes, tsunami, and wildfires. Natural phenomena is the earthquake. Earthquake can result in ground shaking, soil liquefaction, landslide, fissures, and avalanche, fire, and tsunamis. Although an earthquake is one of the natural disaster, if there is a changes in temperature, weather, large changes ng atmospheric pressure caused by major storm, kay maka-trigger siya ng earthquake. So, climate change can cause earthquake. And if these changes of climate kay naga-increase, mataas din ang tendency na palagi na maranasan ng tao ang earthquake. This is the landslide. Landslide defined as the movement of mass or of rock, debris, or earth down a slope. Landslide are a type of mass wasting which denotes any downslope movement of soil and rock under the direct influence of gravity. So, how does landslide related to climate change? Ang landslide is another casualty of a climate change. Why? Climate change can alter landslide via increasing air temperature, higher intensity, and more frequent heavy rain event, decreasing summer precipitation, and sea level rises. Increasing air temperature contribute to slope instability by enhancing the thermal breakdown of rock. Warm condition can cause increased evaporation, leading to drier soil. So, kapag nagkaroon ng increase of air temperature kay if ever na mag-init ng sobrang init, 'di ba naga-crack man ang lupa. So, may tendency na magkaroon ng gap kapag masyadong mainit ang panahon, magkaroon ng crack sa lupa na magkaroon din which can cause gap sa two soil. So pag nag-ulan na, pwede na, pag malakas masyado ang ulan, pwede na ma-absorb ng kabilang lupa is madaming water. So, kay wala naman sila nag-hold dalawa, pwede na mahulog na siya, or yun na, mag-landslide na siya. Bale, mahulog yung part na hindi na nag-hold doon sa mas stronger na soil. So, next natural phenomena is the volcanic eruption. When a lava and a gas are released from a volcano, sometimes exclusively, the most dangerous type of eruption is called the glowing avalanche, which is when freshly erupted magma flow down the side of the volcano. They can travel quickly and reach temperature of up to 1,200 degree Fahrenheit. So, sa volcanic eruption, kay it affects on climate change because it released carbon dioxide and other gases. On the other side, climate change could influence how frequently volcanic eruption occurs because global warming causes the melting of glaciers, many of which covers the flank of active volcanoes. A massive melting will reduce the pressure on the Earth's surface, altering process in its crust. Pero sa ibang tao kay they look volcanic eruption as helpful sa earth kay it is the way of earth cooling itself. Another natural phenomena is flood. Flooding is the major threat from tropical cyclone for people living inland. Flash flooding, defined as a rapid rise in water level, can occur quickly due to intense rainfall. So, climate change is affecting our water cycle, which refer to the way water moves about our planet. How does climate change lead to flooding? Because of heavier precipitation, a warmer atmosphere holds and subsequently dump more water. So, the more na mainit ang panahon, kay the more na naga-evaporate ang tubig sa clouds, diba? So, kapag sobrang init, madami ang ma-evaporate na water. So, marami ang maipon na tubig sa taas. So, mas marami ang mabalik na tubig pabalik sa lupa. That's all. This is the hurricane or typhoon. Hurricane and typhoon are the same weather phenomenon. Tropical cyclone is a generic term used by meteorologists to describe a rotating organized system of clouds and thunderstorms that originate over tropical or subtropical water and has close low-level circulation. The weakest tropical cyclone are the cold tropical depression. If a depression intensifies such that its maximum sustained winds reach 39 miles per hour, the tropical cyclone become a tropical storm. So, the only difference between the hurricane and the typhoon is the location where the storm occurs. So, if it's above the North Atlantic and Central North Pacific or Eastern North Pacific Ocean, we call it a hurricane. If it's over the Northwest Pacific Ocean, usually East Asia, we call it a typhoon. As a climate change, the condition governing cyclone formation are changing. For example, increasing sea surface temperature are giving tropical cyclone more energy, increasing their intensity and making them more destructive. So as a result of climate change, typhoon and other natural disasters are getting stronger, causing more damage and casualties.
So, good day everyone. I am wife Milioria, and in continuation to Miss Alexis' part which is the natural phenomena related to climate change. So, tornadoes. So, tornadoes, a violently rotating column of air touching the ground, usually attached to the base of a thunderstorm. Tornadoes are nature's most violent storms. So in the Philippines, an average of 12 to 24 tornadoes hit every year. So the strongest tornado recorded in the Philippines was last August 14, 2016. And the cities that was affected was Manila and Quezon. It damaged 200 houses and it injured two people, and it was 6 minutes long, and it was caused by a severe thunderstorm in Manila Bay. So next is tsunami. Tsunami is a series of large waves of extreme long wavelength and period usually generated by a violent impulsive undersea disturbance or activity near the coast or in the ocean. So the most recent recorded tsunami in the Philippines is during the time na nag-tsunami din sa Japan. Pero here in the Philippines, it caused no damage and no life was lost. But the strongest tsunami that happened in the Philippines was in 1976 in Moro Gulf in western Mindanao. So the tsunami waves were reported to be as high as 9 meters, and it killed 4,381 people. So, wildfires. Wildfires are unplanned fire that burns in a natural area such as forest, grassland, or prairie. Wildfires are often caused by human activity or a natural phenomenon, such as lighting, and they can happen at any time or anywhere. So, the largest wildfire that happened in the Philippines was in Benguet, and almost 1,000 hectares was damaged. So, it was reported that the reason for that wildfire is kaingin. And kaingin is when the farmers burn, nag-burn sila ng kahoy para mag-create ng ashes, dahil doon na land is magtanim sila ng new crops. So, for fertilizer, sunog sila ng mga kahoy doon sa plano nila kung saan magtanim ng mga bagong crops. So, yung ashes is gagawin nilang fertilizer. And yun yung reportedly reason kung bakit nag-start yung sa Benguet, na which is ang damage is mas malaki pa sa San Juan City. So, San Juan City is only 595 hectares, and the damage in the Benguet was 1,000 hectares. So, burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels made from decomposing plants and animals. These fuels are found in the Earth's crust and contain carbon and hydrogen, which can be burned for energy. Coal, oil, and natural gas are example of fossil fuels. So, fossil fuels releases greenhouse gases, and those greenhouse gases magstay siya sa atmosphere. And ang greenhouse gases is nag-add sa temperature sa Earth. Mo ang nagapa-warm sa tua. But if it's too much na, mo nang nag-high siya, and that is why we are experiencing global warming. So, we are burning fossil fuels to generate energy, and those energy we use it in electricity to power our transportation and industrial processes. So, and it is said na 50% ang pag-increase sa burning of fuels since the Industrial Revolution started. So, man-made emissions. Burning fossil fuels for electricity, heat, in industry and in transportation. Just like I mentioned in burning fossil fuels. So, deforestation, overuse of chemical fertilizers, and industrial animal production all increase the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, leading to global warming. So like the ang burning of fossil fuels and man-made emissions is interconnected sila. So ang mga emissions na atong gina-produce is like sa cars, and then burps, radio broadcast, and then like even our farts or mga autot is our emissions. So kana siya na emissions kay syempre just like if kahit mag-breathe lang tayo, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. So yun, that is greenhouse gases, just like I mentioned sa so greenhouse gases siya sa atmosphere, mag-stuck siya dito, and then pwede siya magstay dito for decades and for even 100 years. So even before pa ta nag-burn of 10 years ago pa, so kato na init is naa dito. That is why man-made emission and burning of fossil fuels is dako jud ang iyang contribution sa pag-rise sa atong temperature and for global warming. So, degrees of global warming. So, the Earth has warmed by 1.1 degrees Celsius. A new United Nations report addresses the differing consequences of warming by 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius. So, the Earth's temperature has risen 0.08 degrees Celsius since 1880. But since 1981, has risen to 0.18 degrees Celsius. So, naging twice siya sa pag-rise before 1880. So, even though if titingnan natin siya, parang maliit lang and to compare the duration, parang maliit lang yung pag-rise, but even like the slightest addition to the temperature of the earth is can affect us significantly. For example, some part of the globe is magka-experience sila ng heat waves or water shortage and like damage sa corals. So it is alerting pa rin siya, like nakakabahala pa rin kahit konti, kahit parang tignan natin parang konti lang ang naad, pero nakakabahala pa rin siya. Hothouse Earth. Hothouse Earth is conditions arising from a level of climate change that would be deemed extremely dangerous, rendering some parts of the world habitable. So hothouse earth is like scenario or parang prediction that if patuloy na magtaas ang temperature ng ating earth or magpatuloy ang global warming, is maging inhabitable na ang some part. So according to this scenario, agriculture will be possible only in northern latitudes. The world's desert will expand, tropical rainforests will be devastated, glaciers will melt, and some cities will sink. Most terrestrial biodiversity and marine life will be destroyed. So, scenario siya, or like nag-assume na if dili mag-stop ang global warming or if mag-continue ang pag-rise sa temperature sa atong earth, is this is what is gonna happen. So, maging inhabitable na siya. And so, of course, if it would be very dangerous for us, because as of the moment, even though research na nila or ginapag-aralan nila ang Mars, so dili pa siya confirm that we could transfer there. So carbon budget. Carbon budget is the remaining amount of greenhouse gases that humans can emit before the planet warms by 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius depending on the set limits. So, mo lang, so ito lang yung parang limitations, may limitations bago yung pag-release natin ng greenhouse gases. May limitation siya bago magtaas na naman yung temperature na. And which is, like I said, even though napaka-konti na ng pagtaas ng temperature, could be significantly dangerous for us. Sa same for example sa New York, meron silang clock doon na which shows kung kailan ang next disaster na darating. And yung timer na yun is based siya sa carbon budget. Environmental migration. People will begin to move en masse in an effort to fulfill their basic needs. There will be local conflicts over land and resources. The worst case scenarios envisage a global conflict and other impacts. For instance, increasing gaps and segregation between the rich and the poor, and the disintegration of nation states. So of course, if like na mentioned before, like mga na-mention ko before, na there is a possibility that the Earth will be inhabitable if magpapatuloy ang climate change and global warming. So of course, people affected, so kunwari magiging uninhabitable na yung part na yun, or grabe na ang effect ng doon na side sa Earth, grabe na ang effect ng climate change. So of course, people will move to the less climate endangered areas. So yun ang mangyayari, magiging conflict na siya. So siguro yung iba parang kung sa ano pa papalag sila na ba't sila lilipat doon, like especially if massive yung numbers na lilipat doon. So this could lead to many dangerous things like mentioned conflict, and then gaps between the rich and the poor.
Hello everyone, now let's move on to the proofs kung bakit mayroon nga bang climate change na nangyayari dito sa mundo. Unang-una, according dito sa table na ipinapakita ng NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, ito yung global temperature ranging from the year 1880 hanggang year 2000. So, makikita natin dito na ang black dots or ang black lines ay yung annual mean ng taon, whereas the red line is the 5-year running mean ng that year up to the last 5 years. So, makikita natin dito na yung base temperature nila is from the 1951 to 1960. So, ito yung reference standard nila for the temperature anomaly. Kasi sinasabi dito na yung definition ng anomaly is yung difference or deviation of a value from a reference standard. So, yung reference standard na ginamit dito ng NASA is the global temperatures of the years 1951 to 1960. So, sinasabi dito sa table na mula 1880 hanggang 1940 ay mas malamig ang global temperature nito sa 1951 to 1960. Samantala, pag sobra na sa 1960 onwards hanggang sa year 2000, makikita natin na tumaas yung global temperatures from the annual mean up to the 5-year running mean. Tumaas ang global temperatures from 1960 to 2000 kung ikukumpara natin sa global temperatures ng 1951 to 1960. The recordings of the NASA and other observatories sa global temperatures are only theoretical proofs that there is rising global temperatures. However, let us look closely sa reality kung ano nga ba yung mga proofs kung nag-e-exist ba ang rising global temperature. So, unang-una tingnan natin yung glaciers sa polar regions ng Earth, the North Pole and the South Pole. Ipinapakita sa mga balita na mayroon talagang pagtutunaw ng polar glaciers sa North Pole and South Pole, titignan natin yung yung comparison ng ice glaciers from 1914 to 2004. Itong picture sa ating left side, makikita natin na punong-puno ng ice glacier yung region ng Alaska, whereas pag titignan natin sa 2004 ay naging tubig na ito, no? Natunaw na yung ice glacier due to rising global temperatures. So let us ask ourselves, ano nga ba yung implications ng melting pole glaciers or melting ice glaciers sa polar regions ng Earth? So isipin natin, pag natunaw yung mga ice reserves sa polar regions, 'di ba? Tataas yung sea level. So ang one effect of rising global temperatures are the rising sea levels due to melting of ice glaciers. Makikita natin dito sa table, no, na yung ground data ng sea level as recorded by the coastal tide gauge records mula 1870 hanggang 1990 ay tumaas ito ng up to 150 to 1.7 millimeters per year. Hanggang 1990 na lang yun. So, imagine, na lang yung pagtaas ng sea level ngayon sa this current year. There has a news, no, dati recently this year lang na Jakarta, Indonesia is facing the fastest or the greatest effect of global rising sea level, no? Kasi more than or about 50% of their city has already been consumed by the rising sea level po. So there will come to a time na pag sumobra pa yung pagmelt ng glaciers ay maaaring there will be some cities like Jakarta sa Indonesia and other cities will be fully immersed in water and they will be removed from the global map. Okay, in the local context, tignan naman natin kung ano yung epekto ng rising global temperatures sa Philippines. Tackle na natin kanina kung ano yung epekto nito sa polar regions at sa Jakarta, Indonesia and other countries. And now let us go to the Philippines. Kung ano nga ba yung epekto ng climate change sa Philippines. So, unang-una, temperatures are rising especially in the dry season. So, kailan nga ba yung dry season natin? It is from December to May, whereas the wet season is from June to November. So, yun nga yung mangyayari, no, sa nagkakaroon ng extreme na El Nino na, no, during dry season. And for the second bullet, extreme rainfall and flooding events are more frequent. So, nangyayari ito, nararamdaman natin na from kung i-compare natin yung ngayong panahon at sa dati ay mas na-experience tayo ng mas violent na rainfall and flooding events. So, there is an implication doon sa mga agriculture natin and sa livestock po. Pag nagkakaroon ng palaging nagkakaroon ng extreme rainfall and flooding events. Dito sa extreme droughts and massive wildfires, there has been a recent news, no, nung last year or the past few years na nagkaroon ng wildfire sa Mount Apo, no, na yun yung dahilan na ipinasara ang Mount Apo para ma-recover yung nasunog na parte dahil nagkaroon ng wildfire doon sa Mount Apo, which it has been to be the first time in history. And in rural communities, forests and farmlands are impacted, making crops and food more scarce and expensive for all. Sa balita, 'di ba, pag nanonood tayo ng balita, pag nagkakaroon ng bagyo o ng pagbaha sa isang agricultural farmland ay unang-una naaapektuhan ang mga pananim ng mga magsasaka at ang mga alagang hayop nila. So pag nagkataon na palaging nagkakaroon ng pagbaha, ng pag-ulan o ng pagkatuyo ng lupa ay maaaring maapektuhan ang food supply ng bansa at maapektuhan din ang food security ng ating bansa mismo at tataas ang mga presyo ng bilihin. Tanungin natin kung bakit nga ba nagkakaroon ng climate change. Unang-una bumalik tayo sa greenhouse gases. Di ba pag dumami yung accumulation ng greenhouse gases sa Earth ay nagkakaroon ng greenhouse effect. Umiinit ang mundo, nagkakaroon ng rising global temperature. So, pag nagkaroon yun sa matagalang panahon ay nagkakaroon ng climate change. Yun yung explanation doon. na i-represent ng Mauna Loa Observatory at ng Lodom Ice Core Carbon Dioxide Information Analysis Center sa kanilang historic atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations. Ito ay nakabase sa yung carbon dioxide concentrations nila na sa pagme-measure ay nakabase sa parts per million. So, from 1832 to 2007, nagkaroon ng pagtaas, no? Pagtaas ng carbon dioxide concentration ng about 100 parts per million, no? So ano nga ba ang implication nito? Pag dumami yung yung greenhouse gases sa atmosphere natin ay magkakaroon ng greenhouse effect. So pag nagkaroon ng greenhouse effect, mas iinit ang mundo at mas lalala ang ating global temperature. So tataas po ito at magkakaroon ng climate change. Okay, so let us put into mind na yung greenhouse gases responsible for the global warming ay hindi lamang accountable for the carbon dioxide. We also have methane and nitrous oxide. However, yung major causative agent for the global warming is the carbon dioxide sapagkat ito ay nag-a-account ng 76% ng total greenhouse gases. So, yung carbon dioxide ang nanggagaling sa paghinga ng tao, sa pagsusunog ng mga carbon-based materials, at sa pag-decompose or pag-decay ng mga organic matter. Mayroon din tayong methane na isa sa mga greenhouse gases na nanggagaling sa agriculture or the agricultural sector. Kaya ito yung sinusulong ng mga vegetarians ngayon, no, na sa pagtatangkilik ng mga plant-based na mga pagkain ay nababawasan natin ang production ng methane at ng carbon dioxide dahil na natutuon ang pansin natin sa pagkain ng karne, natutuon ito sa pagkain ng plant-based materials na mas epektibo sa pagbabawas ng mga carbon at methane production sa agriculture. At itong lastly is the nitrous oxide na nanggagaling sa industry at agriculture, which accounts to the 6% of the global emissions. So together, these carbon dioxide at methane at ang nitrous oxide, ito yung three major greenhouse gases na nagkakos ng greenhouse effect, which in turn aggravates global warming. Hindi natin may pagkakailan na yung warming of the climate system is due to human influence, kasi there are a lot of evidence suggesting that yung mga activities natin gaya ng transportation, ng pagsusunog ng mga bagay-bagay at ng illegal logging ay nagko-contribute talaga sa sa pag-aggravate ng global warming, which leads to climate change. Now, let us wonder kung ano nga ba yung mga impacts ng global warming. So, unang-una nafe-feel natin, 'di ba, na umiinit na yung mundo. We are getting uncomfortable pag umiinit na yung panahon. So, kung tayo mga humans, we have the means to comfort ourselves pag nagkakaroon ng mga fluctuations sa climate natin. For example, masyadong mainit, so we have our air conditioners, may mga pampalamig tayo, and pag masyadong malamig naman, we have our heating system. So, kung tayo, we have the capability, ano naman yung impact nito sa ecological aspect ng mundo. So, yung mga animals at mga plants, let us tackle kung ano yung epekto ng climate change sa kanila.
The climate is changing. So number one is temperatures are rising. Average global surface temperature has risen to 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit since 1850 if emission rates for greenhouse gases continue on their current track. Models indicate that the globe will be 4.3 to 11.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer by 2100 than it was in 1990. So, how does temperature rise cause climate change? Warmer temperature can also lead to a chain reaction of other changes around the world. Dahil sa increase ng air temperature at nakakaapekto siya sa dagat, weather pattern, snow and ice, and plants and animals. The warmer it gets, the more severe the impacts on people and environment will be affected. So number two is sea levels are rising. Warmer temperatures not only cause glaciers and land ice to melt, adding more volume to oceans, but also cause seawater to expand in volume as it warms. Under a business as usual greenhouse gas emissions scenario, models indicate that Sea levels could rise 2 feet or more by 2,100 compared to 1990 levels. So, example na lang dito kung paano ba nabubuo ang bagyo. So, sa pagdagsa ng maraming bagyo sa Pilipinas ay maaring makaapekto siya sa climate change o pagbabago ng klima. Kadalasan nabubuo ang bagyo sa gitna ng karagatan na kung saan ang mainit at malamig na hangin ay nag-evaporate dahil sa init ng dagat. At habang ito ay umaakyat, nagkakaroon ng LPA or low pressure area sa paligid. So, dahil sa low pressure area, na-attract niya ang iba pang mga malalamig at hangin sa iba't ibang lugar na kung saan nagkakaroon ito ng bumubuo ng mga ulap. Number 3 is the ocean is acidifying. Much of the carbon dioxide emitted by human activity has already been taken up by the ocean, thus moderating the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. However, as carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it forms carbonic acid, acidifying the ocean. Ocean acidification will likely cause serious harm to marine organisms such as corals, lobsters, and sea urchins. Number 4 is water cycle changes. The seasonal rhythms of streams and rivers have changed as winter precipitation falls, increasingly as rain instead of snow, and as earlier spring temperature can cause in the mountains to melt earlier and faster. Warmer temperatures are also mean higher evaporation rates and thirstier plants and people. Increasing demands for power projection indicate that on average dry areas will tend to get drier and wet areas will tend to get wetter. Extreme weather. It is considered very likely that increasing global temperatures will lead to higher maximum temperatures, more heat, and fewer cold days over most land areas. So, example of extreme weather is the tornado, that can cause include clouds, strong wind, and rain. Flood ay malalakas na pag-ulan, hailstorm, hurricane, or cyclone. Living things are intimately connected to their physical surroundings. Ecosystems are affected by changes in temperature, rainfall or moisture, pH, salinity or saltiness, activities and distribution of other species. In addition to being affected by their physical environment, living things are also intimately connected for each other. For example is yung nangyari sa Africa, nagkaroon sila ng shortage of water. So, mahirapan sila kumuha ng kanilang pangangailangan, lalo-lalo na sa mga hayop na natutuyo na yung kanilang mga rivers or lakes sa pagkukuha na ng kanilang mga tubig. So, sa mga tao naman, nakukulangan sila sa mga pagkain nila. And yan yung cause ng ecological impacts of climate change. So, ecological impacts as a result of climate change. Species and ecosystem are experiencing changes in ranges, things of biological activity, growth rates, relative abundance of species, cycling of water and nutrients, the risk of disturbance from fire, insects, and invasive species. So, even small changes can have significant effects on living things. Each species is affected by such changes individually, but those individual impacts can quickly reverberate through the intricate web of life that makes up an ecosystem. It is important to note that individual species may move and adapt, not entire ecosystems. Ranges shifts. Species are relocating to areas with more tolerable climate conditions. Range shifts particularly threaten species that cannot move fast enough, depend on conditioning that are becoming more rare, like sea ice. About 40% of wild plants and animals that have been studied over decades are relocating to stay within their tolerable climate changes. Some organisms, those that cannot move fast enough or those whose ranges are actually shrinking are being left with no place to go. Timing of biological activity. Some seasonal biological activities are happening to 15 to 20 days earlier than several decades. Trees blooming earlier, migrating birds arriving earlier, butterflies emerging earlier. Changes in timing differ from species to species, so ecological interactions are disrupted. So, if all of the species in an ecosystem shifted their seasonal behavior in exactly the same way, shifts in the timing of biological activity might not create problems. But when a species depends upon another for survival, and only one changes its timing, these shifts can disrupt important ecological interactions, such as that between predators and their prey. Global changes, local impacts. Although climate change is global, the ecological impacts are often. In the Philippines, the impact of climate change are immense, including annual losses in GDP, changes in rainfall patterns and distribution, droughts or pagtuyo, threats to biodiversity and food security, sea level rise, public health risks, and endangerment of vulnerable groups such as women and indigenous people. Impact in the Philippines. Likely effect of the global warming on the Philippines, temperature, tropical cyclone activity, threats to natural ecosystem. So the example of tropical cyclone activity is the climate-related hazard affecting the Luzon. Tropical cyclones or typhoons and droughts are the key climate related hazard affecting Luzon. Heavy rains and floods associated with strong typhoons disrupt the activities of most lowland rice farmers, while highland vegetable and upland corn growers are vulnerable to soil erosion, landslides, and strong winds. Droughts have detrimental effects on upland corn and rain-fed production. As you can see in the Philippines temperature anomaly, the map of the Philippines is the majority color of the temperature anomaly is color orange and red. So, in the orange is 1.0 to 1.4 degrees Celsius, while in the red is the less than 1.8 degrees Celsius. Threats to natural ecosystem. Approximately 1 million hectares of grasslands in the Philippines are highly vulnerable to climate change in the future. Most grasslands in the uplands are prone to fires, particularly during extended periods of dryness and lack of rainfall during summer. So, threats of natural ecosystem. The Philippine rich biodiversity is under threat mostly from human activities, including deforestation, illegal fishing, and illicit wildlife. Illicit wildlife trade continues to put endangered species at the risk of extinctions. In the Philippines, the value of this illegal trade is estimated at 50 billion per year according to DENR. Examples na kanilang binebenta is crocodile na ginagawa nilang bags, turtles, snakes, ginagawa nilang belt, and other species na kanilang binebenta.
So, good day everyone. My name is Remy Ben Manila. So today we will discuss what is coral loss na ma-relate siya sa climate change. So, the 2016 Low Carbon Monitor report foresees that 98% of coral reefs in Southeast Asia will die by 2050. Practically an extinction by the end of the century if currently global warming trends will continue. The IPCC project that by years 2051 to 2060, the maximum fish catch potential of Philippine seas will decrease as much as 50% compared to 2001 to 2010. So, why there is pagbaba ng 50% connection niya sa coral loss. So, if sa climate change kasi, mas lalong umiinit ang mundo, which is the global warming. Nagkakaroon ng mainit na temperature sa dagat dahil rin sa pagtunaw ng mga yellow, which is nakakadagdag ng pag-blue ng kulay sa dagat, which is nag-absorb na siya ng more heat. So, ang mangyayari dyan, pag mainit na masyado ang temperature sa dagat or hindi na normal, nagkakaroon ng what we call the coral bleaching, which is yung mga algae, mga fish na itlog pa na nandoon sa nandoon sa corals, mawawala kasi bleaching siya parang malilinis yung corals, pero pag habang palinis ang corals, parang na rin siya, naglo-loss siya ng mga calcium, so nagiging weak din. So kaya bumababa rin nagdahan-dahan ring nawawala yung mga corals natin at dahan-dahan din itong nadudurog because of global warming or the climate change. So next is the declining rice yield. So, temperature trends and irritated field experiment at the International Rice Research Institute showed that the grain yield decreased by at least 10% of each 1 degree Celsius increase in growing season, minimum temperature in the dry season. So, ang mangyayari dito is every 1 degree Celsius bababa ng 10% ang rice yield, which is malaking epekto sa atin. Kasi ito ay dulot ng climate change ang matinding pag-init or what we call El Nino. Pag meron kasing El Nino, so kadalasan limit lang yung water. So pag limit yung water, hindi masyado nasusuplayan yung mga palay natin, which is nagko-cause ng hindi magandang bunga sa mga palay natin. And ang iba kadalasan namamatay na lang ang palay dahil sa sobrang init ng ating nararanasan. That's why bumababa siya ng 10%. So, the global warming exacerbates at the effect of El Nino, like what I said a while ago. The most recent of which was experienced in the country is from 2015 to 2016. The Department of Agriculture estimated that 413,456 farmers have been directly affected by El Nino, associated drought and dry spell during the last El Nino period. So grabe, ang climate change is hindi lang talaga nakaapekto sa tao, kundi sa lahat, kasi damay-damay na to pag walang pagkain yung tao, maaari ring maapektuhan yung mga ibang namumuhay dito sa ating mundo. So next is the public health emergency. So, higher temperature also triggered a surge of disease such as dengue, malaria, cholera, and typhoid. In 1998, when the Philippines experienced the strongest El Nino phenomenon to date, almost 40,000 dengue cases and 1,200 cholera cases and nearly 1,000 typhoid fever cases were recorded nationwide. So, alam naman natin, there is a bacteria or viruses na kayang mamuhay na matagal sa init or meron ding bacteria na sa init talaga sila nag-i-exist, no? So, tulad nito, paano ba nagkakaroon ng cholera cases every drought? So, kadalasan talaga mangyayari ang cholera or mga kadalasan amoeba na mga ganon pag droughts kasi limited na ang water minsan stuck na, tapos yung mga cholera, we all know naman na sila yung mga bacteria na pag mataas yung temperature lalo silang dumadami. That's why pag El Nino or ting init, dyan nangyayari yung mga ibang sakit which is napakadelikado at dyan rin dumadami ang mga cases na mga sakit na ito. So next is the impact in the Pacific coastline. So shifting range of checker spot butterflies. Added checker Chickerspot Range has shifted northward and to higher elevation over 40 plus years. And Keener Chickerspot, first endangered species, which climate change is officially listed as threat as the factor in the plan of its recovery. So, itong sa Iris Chickerspot is, we all know na sila yung mga butterfly na kanang tira lang sila sa isang small place lang, which is doon lang talaga. Hindi naman yung tumatravel talaga yung mga butterflies ng mga malalayo, kasi kung mag-travel sila malayo, mas malaki yung chance na ma-endanger sila o mawala. So itong Red Checker Spot is gamove na sila northward, which is napakadelikado. Alam nyo ba na 40% sa kanila ang malaking chance nila na mamamatay sila kung sa northward sila pupunta. Then, kung pupunta naman sila sa south, is 30% ang chance nila na mamamatay, which is, both is super delikado pa rin sa kanila kasi maaari silang maubos pag ganun ang ganap. So, ngayon, pumupunta na yung mga edit checker spots sa sa northward, which is tataka na bakit sila pumupunta doon, which is ang main cause pala is the climate change, kasi feel nila mas mainit na sa kanilang lugar, so pumupunta sila sa pa-northwards. And next is the Kino Checker Spot. Ito naman sila is actually okay lang sila kasi naging endangered sila dahil sa climate change, kasi yung mga tirahan nila, yung mga habitat nila is nasisira na. So, kaya unti-unti sila na nawawala. So, instead na makarecover sila agad, hindi sila makarecover kasi mismong habitat nila is na wawala na dahil sa climate change, sa sobrang init. And, yan lang. So, the next one is the impact in the Pacific Ocean, which is the changes in the water. So, it shifts in species ranges, many species moving northward. So, ang case naman dito is na nakakabahala kasi yung mga doon sa mga sa mga equator na mga species sa south is pumupunta na northward kasi hindi na parang mas mainit na doon, 'di ba? Dito sa atin sa equator mas lalo nang umiinit ngayon kaysa noon. And ang nangyayari is yung mga species natin pumupunta na sa northward, which is nagbibigay ng nagiging endangered species na yung mga species sa northward kasi kinakain sila ng mga species na galing sa south. And kaya parang hindi na nababalance yung natin yung ecosystem natin. So the next is the mysterious dead zone along Washington and Oregon coastline caused to underestimate but potential links to climate change. So maraming nagsasabi ang dito daw sa sa Washington at sa Oregon, kaya daw tinatawag ito na dead zone, walang nabubuhay dito na mga na mga water species kasi daw ang hala nila is mga fertilizer daw, mga chemicals na tinatapon sa dagat, but it is not. Pero ang sabi ng scientists, mas malaki ang potential ng dahil ito sa climate change, dahil sa mainit na na tubig sa Washington at sa Oregon. Kasi like what I said in my video kanina, na pag nagiging mas blue ang water or mas magiging dark, mas mas magkuha siya masyado ng mga sunlight, so mas maging mainit siya. So then the species na nandoon is dahan-dahan na namamatay dahil hindi exact sa kanila yung temperature. So the next one is the impact in Alaska and the Arctic. So the effect of ice dependent animals. So diba ngayon na nandito na ang climate change or the global warming is nagme-melt na talaga yung mga ice, which is na lumalalim na rin ang dagat and nahihirapan na yung mga ice-dependent animals, no? So, year-around, sea ice has been shrinking na and walruses nag-move na sila north in each year, nag-move na sila north each year kahit hindi yon ang exact location nila. In 2007, the ice moved beyond the edge of the continental shelf, where the water becomes too deep for the walruses to feed. For the first time in recorded or oral history, thousands of walruses seeking an alternate place to rest between feeding excursions set up camp along the beaches or near the village of Wainwright, Alaska. So pumupunta na yung mga mga ice dependent na mga animals sa mga lugar din sa mga tao. 'Di ba? Dati may sarili na silang lugar which is sila lang talaga ang kayang mabuhay doon na matagal. Ngayon pumupunta na sila sa lugar din ng tao, nakikihalubilo na sila. Kasi yung lugar nila dati is unti-unti nang natutunaw. So, this dense aggregation of animals crush many calves as adults move to and from the ocean to feed. Over time, such as densely packed population could also deplete bottom food and restore along the coast. So, habang nagtatransfer sila, kadalasan yung iba namatay na kasi yung iba matatanda na ng mga walruses, so hindi na nila kaya maglipat. So the next is ang mga polar bear, ganun din ang nangyayari sa kanila. Nagbo-move na sila and in the same time ginahunt din sila, which is lalong nagpababa sa mga lahi nila. One is the impact in Alaska and the Arctic pa rin. So, changing in food change. Increased scrub growth presenting a threat to caribou. So, caribou is it's like a reindeer or a key species in the Arctic ecosystem. They are critical food source of bears, wolves, range, carrion feathers, as well as the indigenous people across the region. So, the scrub crowding out for lichens or key or winter food for caribou. So, ito yung natatabunan yung mga pagkain nila ng snow dahil sa dahil sa climate change, mas kumakapal na yung yelo. Ang nangyayari is natatabunan ng snow yung mga pagkain ng caribou, which is nagpapahirap sa kanila para makakain during winter season. So, scrubs collect snow causing deep snow make it hard to caribou to reach lichens the hidden beneath. So a warmer climate may help caribou in some ways, no. Warmer Arctic summer tends to increase food availability sa kanila, and as a consequence, survival of caribou calls, but disadvantage are countered by other effects like scrubs are crowding out of lichen, key of winter food for caribou. So, talagang dahil sa climate change, pwedeng makakaroon ng instinct ng caribou kasi yun sila, di ba, like ang sabi ko kanina, hinahunt din sila ng ibang hayop, hinahunt din sila ng ibang tao. In the same time, wala rin silang makain dahil sa climate change na sobrang kapal na ng yelo. So the next one is the impact in Alaska and the Arctic pa rin. So the feedback loops, Arctic warming faster. So the Arctic is warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And the sea ice, the seasonal snow cover melts previously reflective white surface converted to darker surface. The thawing permafrost release carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, increasing the greenhouse gases. So, as sea ice and seasonal snow cover melts previously reflect white surface are converted to darker ocean. Like, di ba sabi ko kanina, pag mag-dark ang ocean, mas nag-absorb ito ng heat. Kasi di ba, pag na-observe natin dito sa Kabakan, if magsuot tayo ng mga dark, mas naiinitan tayo. So, ganun din ang ocean. Pag mas nagda-dark ang color niya, mas umiinit din ang temperature nito. Hindi dahil sa sa mga chemical ito nagda-dark, dahil ito sa natutunaw na yellow at lalong lumalalim na dagat, and that's make the ocean more darker, no? So in the dark ocean water and vegetation respectively, this dark surface absorb more solar radiation, diba sabi ko kanina. So it leading to higher air temperature, which lead to even more rapid melting. So 'di ba, imbis na magtigas ulit yung mga tubig sa dagat, is mas lalo siyang pinabilis ng mga ng darker ocean na ma-melt, kasi nag-absorb ito ng more radiation galing sa sun. And permafrost, the permanently frozen ground found throughout cold region, contains a great deal of carbon in the form of partially composed organic matter. No, di ba no? Pag yung permafrost na yan sa ilalim ng snow, which is, pag matunaw yung lahat ng snow, which is makikita na siya, pag mag-exist na siya or ma-expose na siya sa labas, is nagpo-produce ito ng mas maraming carbon, which is nagpapower sa condition natin, or nagpapower sa climate change. As permafrost warms, the microbes that decompose this material become more active, releasing carbon dioxide, methane in the atmosphere. Diba? Like kung ma-expose na yun siya, may lalabas na ng mga microbes, which is nag-expose ng carbon dioxide and methane, and nagpapalala ito sa ating global warming, and mas nagpapabilis ng pagkatunaw ng yelo. So the next one is the impact in Western Mountains. So wildfire, droughts, and insects complex interactions. Climate change increased the risk of fire in areas where decades of total fire suppression have resulted in buildup of dead fuels. Wildfire increase in frequency, size, season, length. Longer, more intense summer droughts stressing trees, and stressed trees are more susceptible to attacking beetles, which leave standing dead fuels in their wake. So in this part, wildfire is dramatically escalating in frequency and extend in western forest among the other areas, and there are now 4 times, kalain mo yun, 4 times as many wildfires exceeding in 1.5 square miles as were 30 years ago. And these frequently large fires are burning 6 times as much forest area in the last 20 years. The western fire season has expanded by more than 10 weeks. And the climate is becoming too dry to support some of our nation forests. Ecologists expect that some droughts and wildfire stricken areas will not recover as forests, but instead regrow as open savanna or grassland ecosystem. So pag ang forest mawala, hindi na talaga yun mababalik as a forest. Magiging na lang silang savanna or grassland, which is so sad lang dahil hindi na talaga mababalik natin sa some animals na nanirahan dito ang nilang tunay na tahanan. So the next one is same pa rin, the impact in Western Mountains. So effect on the American pika. So ang mga pika is nag-climb na sila to the higher elevation, climbing to higher elevation in response to warming. So dahil sa global warming, dahil sa pag-init ng mundo, ay nag-transport na sila to a higher elevation, and many population now isolated in mountain island. So the American pika is a small relatives of rabbit, cute yan siya masyado kung makikita nyo sa picture, in hairs, and it's found in the glacier and national park and other parks throughout the nation ranges in western state. Pika lives in the lowland during last ice age. As the ice retreated, these small animals gradually climbed mountain slope in pursuit of their required climate. No, nagtatransfer na sila kasi yung dati nilang tahanan is umiinit na, hindi na tulad ng mga temperature, hindi na tulad ng temperature ng dati. So, today, the species is restricted to the isolated mountain island as population below about 7,000 feet rapidly go extinct. And the cause of the study suggests as a simple health heat stress. So, nagtatransfer sila or nagiging extinct sila dahil sa heat stress na nangyayari sa kanila at dahil ito sa climate change and global warming. So, the next one is the impact in southwestern desert, no? So, the last 2000-2003 droughts in the Four Corners region was abnormally severe because it combined low precipitation, like 25 to 50% less than the long-term average, with usually high temperature. So, bababa na yung precipitation o pag-ulan doon, and nag-iinit pa masyado o nagtataas yung temperature pa doon, kaya mas nagiging mahirap ang pagtubo ng mga pine tree doon. So, by the end of 2003, a large number of pinyons in the region were dead. The main cause of the death was the infestation by the pine bark beetle, which often target trees that have been weak by other stress like heat and drought. Mas nagiging mahina na yung trees dahil sa heat and drought, and the widespread loss of this pine tree caused a major ecological change over a large area, no? If you see the picture, nag-iba talaga yung itsura niya galing 2000 to 2004. In general, we don't know the threshold for such a major changes before they occur. This example highlight is the threat that a stressful event that would not normally trigger a dramatic ecology change may do so when the ecosystem is subject to many interacting stress. So, hindi lang tayo stress, hindi lang ang mga tao ang stress pag sa global warming o sa climate change. Also, yung mga puno natin, which is nagiging stress din sila, and then it makes them weak at pwede silang magiging in danger din dahil sa heat and drought.
In a recent event of 2020 in April 17, a NASA scientist named Peter Kalmus got viral in social media and in news because he and his coworker and other scientists protested because of his concern about the alarming increase of temperature. So it is said that by 2030, if we cannot do about the climate change, the effects of it might be irreversible onwards. Next slide is about a change of system, technology, and lifestyle. From civic pressure to enforce new policies, lifestyle changes that encourage less wasteful lifestyle, and new technologies to replace obsolete pollution-producing system, and support for the renewal of resources instead of their depletion. Of course, as human beings, we should also help in contributing to reduce the effects of the climate change. We should enforce policies, but not to implement again. Each individual should initiate even small acts to reduce the carbon footprints. We should also help to renew our resources rather than destroying. At the end of this report, I just want to remind everyone that climate challenge is large and complex, but it is very likely that many people working from many angles can help address climate change and its ecological consequences. So as a summary of this report, climate change is a long-term shift of temperature or weather. Due to this, we experience a sudden rise of heat, different and more recurrent disasters or calamities, And we know that climate change is a consequence of human activities. That's why we must find alternatives for our consumptions of energy, water, and agriculture so that we can help reduce the human carbon footprints.